Part 1. I female 17 have this friend, let's call her Jess female 17, and we've been friends for about 2 years now. We met in high school, clicked over some shared interests, and we've been hanging out ever since. At first, everything was great. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. We'd go out to the mall, the movies, or just chill at each other's houses. But over time, something about our friendship started to feel off. Jess has this thing where she kind of expects people to pay for her. It's one of those things that I didn't really catch onto at first, because, you know, when you're friends, it feels normal to help each other out. Like, the first few times we hung out, she'd say things like, "I forgot my wallet," or "Can you spot me this time? I'll pay you back." And I'd think, sure, no problem, because, I mean, what kind of friend wouldn't? It's not like I was keeping track or expecting her to rush home and Venmo me that very second. I thought, okay, she'd get me back next time, or maybe she'd buy the snacks at the movies, or grab my coffee the next time we go out. But then, next time just never seemed to come. Every time we'd go out, there was a new excuse. "Oh, I don't have cash right now," she'd say, or "I'll send you money later when I get home." But later would turn into tomorrow, and tomorrow would turn into never. It got to the point where I felt like I was always the one paying. I'd end up footing the bill for everything, from our fast food runs to movie tickets to random snacks when we'd hang out at the mall. I didn't want to make a fuss, but after a while, it started to wear on me. Like, it's not even that I minded treating her once in a while, but when it felt like it was every single time, it started to feel less like a friendly favor and more like, I don't know, being taken advantage of. This went on for months, and I kept trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. But then there'd be times when we'd go out in a group, and I'd notice how different she acted. If someone else offered to pay for her, she'd act like it was totally normal, almost like she expected it. But she never once said, "Hey, let me cover this one," or even offered to split the bill. I started to notice it more and more, and it wasn't just me picking up on it. Other friends began to see it too. I remember one time, we were at a cafe, and one of our friends had already covered her meal. Just didn't even thank her, just kind of nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world, while the rest of us awkwardly exchanged looks. It got to the point where I realized I wasn't the only one she was doing this to. One of my other friends, let's call her Sarah, pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, has Jess ever, borrowed money from you and never paid you back?" I felt this weird relief because, up until then, I thought I was overthinking it. I mean, I didn't want to believe that my friend was just using me for money. But when Sarah said she had tried to pull the same thing on her, it kind of confirmed what I'd been feeling. The only difference was, Sarah was more firm about saying no, and she didn't let it slide as much as I did. That's when I really started to feel weird about it. It was like, the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me, but I still didn't want to cause drama. I'm not made of money either. I save up my allowance and sometimes pick up babysitting jobs, so it's not like I'm rolling in cash. But I guess I was trying to avoid the confrontation, so I just kept letting it happen, thinking it would be easier to just pay than to have an awkward conversation about it. Anyway, about a week ago, things finally blew up, and I still don't know how to feel about it. Jess and I had planned to go see a movie, just the two of us. It was this movie we'd been hyped about for weeks, and I was actually really excited. We don't get to hang out one-on-one as much these days, so I thought it would be fun. We got to the theater, and I immediately offered to buy the tickets. I know, probably not the best idea given everything, but at that point, I figured it would just make things easier. I had already kind of mentally prepared myself that she wasn't going to pay me back, but I didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of splitting the bill right there at the counter, with a line of people behind us. So, I just said, "I'll get the tickets, paid for both," and we went inside. Now, we get to the concession stand, and I go first. I already knew what I wanted, so I ordered a medium popcorn, a soda, and a side of chicken wings because I was super hungry. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. Nothing beats munching on some good snacks while watching a movie you've been excited to see. The cashier rang me up, I paid, and then I stepped to the side to let Jess order. I figured she'd get something small, like a popcorn or a drink, normal movie snacks, you know? That's what most people do. But Jess, oh no, she went all out. She started rattling off her order, and it just kept going. First, she asked for a large popcorn, which I thought, okay, sure, maybe she's really hungry too. But then she added a large soda, and then she wanted nachos, and not just regular nachos, but the kind with extra cheese and Galapagos. I thought, alright, a little indulgent, but it's a movie night, I get it. But she wasn't done. Next, she asked for a pack of Twizzlers and then a box of Sour Patch Kids. I'm standing there, kind of shifting on my feet, waiting for her to finish, thinking surely that's it, but she kept going. Then, she added another candy, some chocolate-covered almonds, and just when I thought she was done, she asked for one of those big, colorful, fancy slushies that cost like $8. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're huge and mostly ice, and I couldn't believe she was ordering one on top of everything else. I'm standing there, and my eyes just kept widening with every new item she added. It was like watching someone load up at an all-you-can-eat buffet. By the time she was finished, the cashier looked a little surprised, too. I glanced up at the screen, and the total was around $60. I just stood there, kind of shocked, because who spends $60 on movie snacks for one person? And then she did that thing. She turned to me with this expectant look, like she was waiting for me to pull out my wallet and pay for all of it. I felt my stomach drop because I knew exactly what she was expecting, and I just couldn't. I'd already paid for the tickets, and there was no way I was about to spend another $60 on snacks. I mean, that's more than the tickets themselves. Plus, we had already talked about paying for our own stuff this time, so I thought it was clear. But there she was, staring at me, like this was the most normal thing in the world, like I was crazy for even hesitating. I could feel my face getting hot, partly from embarrassment and partly from frustration. I was like, Jess, I thought we were paying for our own snacks this time. I tried to keep my voice calm and casual, like it was no big deal, but inside I was kind of panicking. I didn't want to make a scene, but I also didn't want to be a doormat anymore. She just stared at me, like I had said something completely insane, like I had just suggested we go rob a bank or something. For a second, I thought maybe she had just forgotten her money, so I asked, "Do you have cash or a card on you?" Hoping that maybe there was some simple misunderstanding. But she just looked at me, completely deadpan, and said, "No, I thought you were going to pay." I can't even explain how awkward that moment was. I could feel people in line behind us starting to get restless, like they were wondering why it was taking so long. I felt this pressure building, but I didn't want to cave. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Pretend like $60 was nothing and just fork it over? I said, "I can't cover this for you, sorry." I tried to keep my voice light, like I was just making a casual comment, but I could tell she was getting pissed off. She kind of scoffed, like I had personally insulted her or something, and said, "Wow, okay," in this really snide, passive-aggressive tone. Then, without missing a beat, she turned to the cashier and said, "Never mind," and canceled the whole order. The cashier looked kind of confused but did as she asked. I could feel everyone around us watching, and I felt so embarrassed. I mean, the whole thing was such a mess. There we were, just trying to get some snacks before a movie, and it had turned into this weird, tense standoff. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to back down, but I also hated that it had come to this. Jess was clearly upset. We ended up going into the theater, and she didn't talk to me at all during the movie. I kept trying to make small talk, like this part is so good. Or I can't believe they did that, but she just ignored me. The whole vibe was off, and I could tell she was sulking. After the movie ended, I asked if she wanted to grab something to eat again, thinking maybe we could salvage the night and just talk things out. But she said she wasn't hungry and just wanted to go home. So, I dropped her off, and that was that. Part 2. After that whole awkward scene at the movie theater, I was done. I mean, this had been going on for months, and I was tired of feeling like I was being taken advantage of. It wasn't even just about the money at this point, it was the principle of it. Jess was acting like she was entitled to have everyone else pick up her tab, and I was tired of pretending it was okay. I realized that it was never going to stop unless someone did something, and I figured, why not me? So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called up a few of our other friends who had dealt with the same thing, friends who I knew Jess had borrowed money from and never paid back. I laid it all out, told them how Jess had expected me to pay for $60 worth of snacks at the movies and how this had been a pattern for a while. Turns out, they were all on the same page. Some of them even shared their own stories about Jess forgetting her wallet or promising to Venmo them later and never following through. It was like we were all putting together this puzzle of Jess's behavior, and suddenly, everything made sense. I told them I wanted to teach Jess a lesson, not in a mean-spirited way, but because it was getting out of hand, and we all agreed that she needed to be confronted about it. They were totally on board. So, I came up with a plan. We would all invite her out to dinner, and we'd see what happened when she realized no one was going to pay for her this time. It wasn't going to be a confrontation where we'd gang up on her or anything, but more of a subtle way of making her see that this wasn't cool. When we invited Jess to the restaurant, she was thrilled. She thought it was just a regular hangout, and she had no idea what was coming. I could tell she was excited because she hadn't been talking to me much since the movie incident, but she acted like nothing had happened. She was all smiles, probably thinking this was her chance to make things right without actually addressing the issue, like she could just sweep it under the rug by showing up and acting like her usual self. Little did she know, we all had a bit of a plan. So, we met up at this nice little restaurant, one of those places that's casual but still a bit pricey if you're not careful about what you order. We all sat down, started chatting, and catching up. The vibe was actually pretty good, and for a moment, I thought maybe this wouldn't turn into anything dramatic. Jess was being her usual self, laughing, talking, and just enjoying herself. But then came the moment of truth, ordering. Everyone ordered their meals, and as expected, Jess went all out. She didn't hold back at all. She got an appetizer, a main course, and even a dessert, plus a fancy drink. It was honestly a bit over the top, but we all kept a straight face, letting her do her thing. We ordered our food too, but most of us kept it simple, just one meal and a drink. I remember sitting there, trying to act natural, but I could feel my heart pounding because I knew what was coming when the bill arrived. Dinner went by smoothly, and we actually had a good time. We laughed, shared stories, and it felt like just another normal night out. Jess seemed completely at ease, like she was confident someone would cover her bill at the end of the night. And I'll admit, part of me was worried she'd pull some new trick, like saying she'd Venmo us later, but I was determined to stick to the plan. When we finished eating, the waiter brought over the check, and I felt this weird mix of anticipation and dread. We had all agreed beforehand that we'd pay separately and make it clear that everyone was covering their own portion, no exceptions. Everyone calmly pulled out their wallets and paid for themselves, and for a moment, Jess didn't seem to catch on. She was busy chatting and finishing up her dessert, totally relaxed, but then, it was her turn to pay. The waiter handed her the bill, and I saw her glance down at it. I could tell she was a little surprised because she had ordered a lot, and the total was around $150. Without missing a beat, she looked up and said, "Oh, can you guys cover me? I forgot my wallet." The way she said it was so casual, like this was the most normal request in the world. She was already starting to pack up her things, getting ready to leave, fully expecting someone to step up and say, "Sure, no problem," but this time, nobody moved. We all just sat there, silent, looking at her, and I could see her expression start to shift. It was like she couldn't understand why nobody was rushing to help her out, and the confusion on her face was almost comical. She asked again, sounding a little less sure of herself this time, "Could someone just get this for me? I'll pay you back," but again, no one moved. Finally, one of our friends said, "Sorry, Jess, we're all just paying for our own meals tonight. I don't have enough to cover yours." Another friend chimed in, saying something similar, and you could see Jess's face drop. It was like she had finally realized that her usual trick wasn't going to work this time. For a second, I thought she might try to argue or make a scene, but then something unexpected happened. She slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Yep, her wallet. The same one she claimed to have forgotten. She took out her card and paid the $150 without a word. Everyone was just staring at her, trying to process what we had just seen. Turns out, she had her wallet with her all along. She just hadn't planned on using it. I don't know if she thought she could pull one over on us again, or if she was just hoping someone would feel bad and offered to pay, but whatever her plan was, it clearly didn't work. As soon as she handed over her card, there was this awkward silence, and then someone couldn't hold it in anymore and let out a small laugh. That was all it took. Suddenly, everyone started laughing, not in a mean-spirited way, but more like we were all relieved the situation had finally come to a head. It was like this big, unspoken truth had been exposed, and we couldn't help but find it kind of funny. Jess was just sitting there, looking completely stunned, like she couldn't believe what was happening. She asked why everyone was laughing, and I think that was when it clicked for her that this was no coincidence. One by one, each of us told her how much she owed us from previous times. Some had covered her meals, others had lent her money for small things here and there, but it added up. We weren't trying to attack her, we just laid it out, like, hey, you owe me $20 from last month, you still haven't paid me back for the concert tickets, and so on. She was visibly uncomfortable, and I could tell she wasn't expecting this at all, but the thing is, she couldn't argue. She had promised to pay us back and never did, and now she was being called out on it. She ended up taking out more money and paying everyone what she owed. You could see the frustration and embarrassment all over her face, but she didn't say a word. Once she was done paying, she stood up, muttered something about needing to leave, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. After she left, we all sat there for a moment, still kind of shocked at how everything had played out. Then, we started laughing again, mostly out of disbelief that it had taken us so long to do something about it. It felt like this huge weight had been lifted, and for the first time, I didn't feel awkward or guilty about it. Jess had needed to be confronted, and even though it wasn't exactly how I imagined it would go, I'm glad we did it. Part 3. After that night at the restaurant, I thought maybe Jess would take some time to reflect on what happened. I mean, it was a pretty big wake-up call, and anyone else would have been embarrassed enough to rethink how they act around their friends. But, as it turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. The very next morning, I woke up to a series of notifications from our group chat. You know that feeling when you see a bunch of messages, and you just know it's going to be drama. Yeah, that's exactly what hit me when I saw Jess's name pop up over and over again. She had sent this long, ranting message, and as I started reading, my jaw just dropped. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jess was angry, genuinely pissed off, and she wasn't mincing her words. She basically started off by saying that what we did at the restaurant was out of line, and she was deeply disappointed in how we treated her. According to Jess, we had been incredibly rude to let her order all that food, knowing full well that she wasn't planning to pay for it herself. She said that if we weren't willing to cover her bill, we should have told her ahead of time, so she wouldn't have come out at all. I had to read that part twice because I couldn't wrap my head around it. She was actually blaming us for not giving her a heads up that we wouldn't be paying for her $150 meal. But that wasn't even the worst part. Jess went on to explain that she had always been used to other people covering her expenses and that it was just how things worked for her. She said she was a girl, and it was normal for girls to be treated, especially by their friends, and that we were being unreasonable to expect her to pay for herself. She genuinely thought that it was no big deal for her friends to pick up the tab, and the fact that we had made her pay not only for her meal but also the money she owed everyone was, in her words, completely disrespectful. I'm reading this message, and I'm just thinking, is this real life? It was like she had completely missed the point of what happened. She actually believed that the whole situation was our fault because we tricked her into coming to the dinner under the pretense that someone would pay for her. Jess said she felt ambushed and humiliated and that we should have been more considerate of her feelings. She even tried to make it sound like we'd set her up on purpose, like this whole thing was some kind of cruel prank we had orchestrated just to embarrass her. And then, she got to the part that really had me shaking my head. She basically said that if she knew nobody was going to pay, she wouldn't have bothered coming. She felt like she wasted her time, and she was genuinely upset that she had to spend her own money. I could not believe the entitlement. It wasn't just the fact that she had the nerve to complain after all this time of freeloading off of us. It was the way she was framing it, like she was the victim and we were the ones being unreasonable. I didn't know what to expect from the rest of the group, but it didn't take long for people to start responding. At first, there was this awkward silence, like nobody knew how to even begin to address what she had said. But then, one of our friends sent a message that was basically a laughing emoji, and it was like that broke the ice. Suddenly, everyone was chiming in, and the responses just kept coming. People were baffled, asking if she was seriously trying to justify all of this, and a few friends even brought up specific times they had paid for her or covered for her in the past, pointing out that she had always promised to pay them back and never did. Jess didn't back down, though. She doubled down, insisting that we were overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. She said it was just a few dollars here and there, and it wasn't like she had forced anyone to pay for her. She even tried to play the sympathy card, saying she couldn't believe that we would all turn on her like this after everything they had done together as friends. But the thing is, by this point, nobody was buying it. It was like a switch had flipped, and everyone had decided enough was enough. One friend pointed out that it wasn't just a few dollars here and there, and that the money she had borrowed from them, combined with what she expected everyone to pay for, had added up to quite a bit. Another friend mentioned how she would always have her wallet with her but still claimed she forgot it, just like she had done the night before, and that it wasn't fair to keep pretending she was entitled to other people's money. Jess tried to argue back, but every time she did, someone else would remind her of another instance where she had pulled the same stunt. It was like everyone had been holding back for so long, and now they were all finally speaking up. I couldn't help but feel a little bad for Jess, even if I was still upset with her. I mean, it was clear she had no idea how bad her behavior had gotten, or at least she had never expected to be called out on it. But at the same time, I couldn't believe she was still trying to act like she was the victim. It was like she genuinely thought she was in the right, and I realized then that she had probably been thinking that way for a long time. Maybe she had gotten used to other people just letting it slide, but clearly, things were different now. The whole thing turned into a kind of intervention. People started talking about how they liked hanging out with her but didn't appreciate feeling like they were being taken advantage of. Someone even said that they wouldn't mind treating a friend every now and then, but it felt like Jess had made it into a habit, and that wasn't cool. She still tried to push back, but at this point, she was outnumbered. Every excuse she tried to make was met with a story or a reminder of when she had done the exact same thing she was denying. It was kind of sad to see, but it felt necessary. This had been building up for so long, and I think we all needed to get it out there, even if it was uncomfortable. In the end, Jess just stopped responding. She read all the messages, but she didn't reply. I don't know if she was embarrassed or just didn't know what else to say, but she kind of disappeared from the chat for the rest of the day. Who is Ada in this situation?